Hello, everyone. Um, Members of the team uh, from the macro framework at PNG Treasury, I'd like to give you a little guide for what we're coming up in the mission, and that includes some work that we're going to be asking you to do um, even before the mission starts. And our tentative dates, okay, these, if I'm not mistaken, are February 9th through 12th, 2023, where we'll have a virtual mission coming up. But anyway, um, here are the main steps. The first thing that we wanted you to do is, and this is prior to the mission, we'd like you to get us the latest historical data or estimates prior to 2023 and to enter them into a sheet called single source data. And I'll be showing you that in a second. After that, we're going to look a little bit at the structure of the file, how these data on single source are transmitted, channeled to other sectors, okay? So the idea is you have everything is hard pasted here, it's history, and then this gets put into the various sectors. Then we want to talk about a little bit about sort of a technique, how we get a simultaneous solution, and I'll be explaining that, what that means and why we have to do this. Then we want to talk about how we might introduce satellite models. For example, the Phillips curve. We do know that you have a Phillips curve, but we haven't seen that yet. So instead, what we did was try to imagine what a more general Phillips curve might be like, and how the results of that will be injected into the model. So, and then finally, for the projections, okay, we're also going to consider other satellite models, for example, nowcasting or latest unreleased data casting, just because we do realize that GDP for 2020, 2021, and 2022, they're still a little bit up in the air, and you're using some indicators to get them. We want to take that into account, and we want to put that into a satellite model. And then finally, we want to talk about how we get the tables shaped up for projection. So let's take a look at this first idea, pre-mission. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to just, let's see, I'm going to get out of here for a second, and I'm going to go to the spreadsheet, and you can see this works single cell data, and you can see that we can go all the way down here to let's call it line, what is that? That's line 257. It turns out that anything below line 257 is optional, so I'm going to hide that actually. So, but I mean, you can see here that we have data. This is the production side data, which we have in, okay, and you have a database on that up through 2017. You have public sector revenue and expenditures up through 2017. You have an external sector, which means that you have the balance of payments in the current account up through 2017. Total external debt up through 2017. We have the same thing, but in domestic currency, 27, and that's up through 2017. And then finally the monetary data, and then we have some other stuff. We have prices, deflators, exchange rates. So we have the exchange rate, the CPI deflator, the export deflator, and the import deflator. And okay, we can talk about where we get those, but these are data that you guys, that we have already taken from the PNG. And what we would ask is that you update both the historical data in case there have been some revisions going back, let's say, to 2006, all the way up through 2022. And once again, we know that the values in here are going to be highly preliminary, but we're going to have to go with something for these years. Okay, so there's that. Let's go back to our little presentation here, and it's going to be right here. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to kind of take a look at the structure of the file. So the idea is that you hard pasted things in here, but then they're going to be transmitted. They're going to be placed into different sectors. So for example, you have public sector data here, and you have the government spreadsheet. So let me just show you here. You can see that okay, all of this data from fiscal ends up on the government or fiscal spreadsheet, okay? So that's something that we need to know. Then the next thing I want to point out is that we are going to be doing simultaneous solutions, and it turns out that you don't have to do very much. There is an option, and if I can go back to the Excel spreadsheet here, I will show you the option here. You want to go to File, and then you want to get Share, no, Export, Publish, one of these guys here, Account, Options, there you go, Options. Okay, and you can see the options. There are general options, but then there's formula options, and you can see enable an iterative calculation, and we put maximum iteration 500. That's large, that's small enough to not slow it down, but large enough to ensure that pretty much any algorithm can be solved. So the idea here is that you may think of, let's say, income or output determining consumption, but consumption also determines output. So there's a two-way causality. Okay, so what we're recommending here, and I can take you actually right in to the options section, and you can see that under formulas, you see that I've clicked Enable Iterative Calculation and Maximum Iterations 500. And so the idea is that you may have, let's say, consumption affecting GDP, but also GDP affecting consumption. So you want things to go in both directions. And you need to have an iterative solution. Either that, or you can do an algebraic solution with a multiplier. But we found that this is a whole lot easier. And then putting maximum iterations of 500, kind of like you have to give the machine enough time to kind of circle in to find that solution. And it should be around 500. And otherwise, you may not get a good enough solution. So there's that. So we're going to be stressing that in the in our discussion, and that's going to lead us into how we might do a satellite model. And the model that we have in this case would be the Phillips curve. Now we are aware, and if I can go into the spreadsheet again, that you guys do have a Phillips curve tool, and we're not sure what that is, so we kind of try to imagine what that would be like. We do know that inflation, it would be in the first instance be reflecting external inflation, but we also know that we do have a suspicion, although we can talk about this, that the domestic output gap, the percentage difference between actual output and the potential output, the level of potential output would be an element. Now, some may say, well, it's entirely external and there's no role for the output gap. I'm not sure I would buy into that, but if we did do that, we would just put this coefficient to equal to 0. Then we would want to add in the effect of exchange rate pass-through, and then you could put any other number of factors here. So you can see that we have these factors here. We have the three coefficients. The coefficient on external inflation is just 1. We have calibrated an output gap of 0.4, which means that if the output gap goes up by 1%, inflation goes up by 0.4%. That's not a terribly big response. And then we have a 0.3, which is basically saying that if the exchange rate depreciates by 1%, prices will go up by 0.3%. And that's sort of in line with what we know about exchange rate pass-through. So we can talk about that. But then the point is that we're going to take this and here we have this, and we're going to be um, putting this into our our, our 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 other files. So the idea is that our satellite model gets us um, our rate of inflation, but it also turns out that in this sheet we'll be calculating the output gap, and you can see the output gap goes up here. So once again, because we have implemented um, simultaneous equations, and that was in the previous step, everything will solve out automatically. So that's what. So our proposal here is that we use this as a start, but ultimately we'll be using we'll be using the Treasury's model for inflation, and this is kind of a template for other inflation. Other satellite models. So now let's go to our, okay, I've listed here a satellite model for nowcasting, or latest unreleased data casting, because we do know that some of the data, let's say GDP for 2022 or even 2021, you might not have still a handle on it, but you might have a little model that you're updating that. We would want to put that in there. And then finally, what we're going to do to get through the end is we want to build out the tables so we get projections up to 2028. So anyway, this is just meant to be a little bit of a starter, of a preview of coming attractions, or in terms of what we plan to do at the beginning of February. But we would like to request, once again, if we can go back to this sheet here, that that members of the PNG Treasury team get as much of this data for single source data and have it entered into this sheet, because that way we can hit the ground running. Okay? All right. I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much.